All right, Mr. Howard, thanks for sitting down and talking to us today.
Yeah,
it's
thanks,
been
Todd.
some time since we talked about a supplemental levy last time. So where are we at right now, and what are you guys looking to attain this year?
So our current levy, we're on the last year of the 2020 supplemental levy. So we will go to the patrons, ask them for a renewal. So this is a replacement of the current levy, which will run out in June. So where we're at right now, we're going to go to the patrons, ask for a $1.7 million levy. It's about $100,000 less than last year, or about 6%. So that's kind of where we're at with that current levy request.
And it equates out to $26.72 per $100,000 of assessed taxable value, and that's saving residents money than you guys have been done in the past. How come you guys are cutting back on the supplemental levy funds you're trying to raise this year?
So we've been very fortunate in a couple things. Our enrollment's up a little bit, and any student enrollment increase, of course, will help us out funding-wise. We're also continuing to come down off of a peak within our levy back in 2016. That was our largest levy amount at $2 million, so we're continuing to scale back. We needed to do some things to kind of shore up our finances then. So we've been able to continue to decrease and kind of get to the point where we're not adding to a fund balance, but we're also not taking away from that. So hopefully this will be the next step in doing so.
Okay. How much of the supplemental levy pays for the school district's functions?
Well, so it's 100% of it goes to the school district. Okay. So it's a tax-based local revenue, and all of it comes to the district itself. So nothing goes to the state or anywhere there. About 86% on average is where our salary and benefits goes, and then the other 14 or so percent would go to capital projects or capital purchases, supplies, transportation. Potentially it could help support our child nutrition program. Of course, all of it, again, staying within the district, but the vast majority goes directly to hiring of supplemental staff who can come in and help support what the state does not fund us for.
Okay. How much does the state and federal government fund you, and why is there such a gap? A lot of Idaho schools, smaller schools like ourselves, have to run supplemental levies. How come they don't fund us 110%?
That's a good question, and I don't necessarily know that answer. I would assume that the legislature, where they sit right now, they've got a number in mind, and then they kick it back out to the districts then to turn around and make up any difference. About 80% of Idaho's districts now run a levy. What we usually look at in terms of the combined, I think our patrons are at about 32% of our overall budget. Federal government directly, we only get about 2% of our budget directly from the federal government, and the rest is from the state. So yeah, a little over 30% comes from our local patrons, which is a big contribution for sure.
So it's crucial. What else do you use the supplemental levies for? What else do you pay for with the money?
Well, more specifically, basically what we're able to do is provide extra programs and electives at the high school. In addition to that, we're able to also do similar things at the elementary school, things like music and PE, extra intervention support help. This year, we have a first grade teacher, which is helping us staff a rather large class. So instead of having 2 large classes, we're able to spread those kids out amongst 3 teachers. Overall, across the district, the supplemental levy, because of the number of teachers that we're able to bring on beyond what the state funds us for, then it keeps our class size numbers down in averages somewhere in the high teens instead of low to mid to upper 20s across the board. So it helps us with those small class sizes.
And you mentioned, we've been running these levies for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, how lucky has Wallace been in getting approval of these supplemental levies?
The community historically has been very supportive. There was a levy back in the 80s when the Bunker Hill shut down. Times were tough, people were leaving, and the levy failed the first time. They ran it the second time and it passed. Outside of that, it is they've been very supportive, and we've passed our levies on the first in that first March. First March election. So so far we've had a good track record. So
Yeah.
hopefully that will continue.
Hopefully. What do you say to somebody who's a little iffy about voting yes and increasing taxes? What do you tell that person to vote yes for the supplemental levy?
Well, the nice thing is this is not a new tax, so it's not an additional tax. As you mentioned, it's actually going to be a little bit less. If everything stays the same in terms of the tax brackets, and I can't speak for any of the other county entities of whether they're increasing things, but if you took the current rate and everything stayed the same and we adopt the new rate, then it wouldn't even be equal to what we're paying now. So, what I would say is look at the extra things that we're able to offer compared to what we wouldn't be able to offer without that levy. And I think you would find that it allows us to do some things that are pretty unique for a small rural Idaho school or anywhere in the nation. So we're able to do some pretty amazing things with the extra funds, and I do think it has a very positive impact on our students.
If we don't get the supplemental levy passed, what happens then? What do you guys do?
Well, there's a couple things. There are additional voting dates in the future, but you do run out of time, so to speak, and you run out of dates. So we could rerun it again. We'd have to come back as a group and probably look at a game plan to why it didn't pass and how we might address it to get it to pass in the future. If we were to not pass it at all, then we have to cut 34% of our budget out of the entire budget. And again, looking at the fact that 86% of that or so is salary and benefits, the large proportion of that is going to be staffing cuts. And so, and that's never a good process to go through. So.
Just a generic question. Has inflation caused the university, or not the university, I'm still stuck in Moscow, I haven't been up home for a while, the school district, has it costed the school district anymore for paying teachers and such?
Inflation is going to have an impact, there's no doubt. We still have to purchase things on the open market like anywhere else. We don't get special cuts rates because we're a school district. Some of the things that we purchase for the year, we purchased at the very beginning. So at that point, they probably weren't seeing the big increases, but we do purchase things month to month. All of our food comes as a month-to-month rate. Fuel, so anytime there's an increase in fuel, we feel it on those things there. I guess in this case, we're actually at probably a little better point because a lot of our costs are set in that August and September time. Our big bulk purchases of things like paper and textbooks, they're done then. So we won't see that. Now, if it continues, then, and the increases that they have now, if they don't come down, then we'll feel a pinch on that for sure next year. So definitely something to look at. One good point, again, I would bring up is that our enrollment is up a little bit. Not so much that we're having to look for extra staff, so we're able to take that extra funding from the state based on that enrollment, and we can kind of address some of those things. So it's not totally doom and gloom, but of course any increases are going to be felt. We got to budget for it somewhere.
Yeah, and so this levy takes that into consideration then?
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right, $1.7 million for 2 years. When can people get out to vote?
So the process right now, if people are not able to make that March 8th election, they can look at doing an absentee vote. Okay. We're getting pretty close on a timeline for that. So if people have not reached out to the county to get that process going, by the time they mail things back and forth, there is a time crunch. I did speak with the county representative last week, and that we're getting close on that. So March 8th is the in-person vote. Okay. And we're back to pre-COVID voting stations. So we have the Osborne VFW. Mm-hmm. We've got the Good Samaritan Center in Silverton. Let's see, we've got a church in town. Is it First Congregational? I got to look at my cheat sheet here. I think it's the First Congregational.
That's cool.
United Congregational Church in Wallace. The only difference this year, Pritchard Murray, for some reason, their polling station is not going to be open. So the information I received from them is that those folks that are going to participate on March 8th will have to vote at the county courthouse. Okay. So it's open from 8 to 8. The other thing that's good to know in Idaho, you can register to vote the day of the election. They ask that you have a picture ID, preferably a driver's license, a military ID or a passport, and then some form of preferably a utility bill with the physical address. And they recommend bringing a couple different options for that address, just in case what you bring doesn't work. You might have a couple options. So.
Okay. All right. Anything else you'd like to say to the public?
I think it's important, some of the questions that have been raised dealing with just school finance and how that works and why we ask for a levy. And for example, one of the questions I heard not that too far in the past was, we received so much COVID money and ESSER money, they call it. Why are we not using those funds instead of the levy? And not to give a long, drawn-out finance story, basically there's different funds that come to us and we can use them certain ways. Some of the things are discretionary, which gives us wide ranges, and others are very pinpointed on what we can use. So our levy dollars are very flexible, probably the most flexible compared to any. That gives us discretion to use those how we need to fit within our bills. We have other funds, like our COVID funds, that are very tightly constrained. Those funds not only have certain things that you can and can't spend them on, they also do not allow us to use those funds to spend on things that we were spending money on prior to COVID. So they have the distinction between something that's supplementary and then something that's supplanting. And supplanting basically means is you take funds and you do something with those funds that you were doing before. And you cannot supplant COVID funds for things like levy funds. So where we spend those two pots of money are in complete different places. You cannot use them for the same thing. Yeah. Right. So again, I guess that would be the answer to that question. And then just the fact that by using a combination of all of those things, we're able to run the entire system and the whole school district. So,
all right, March 8th.
March 8th.
1.7 million. My birthday. Get out to vote. All right, Mr. Todd, thank you.
I appreciate it, John. Thanks very much.